Guardians of the Blade by Adalene Martis. Chapter 12. You Stole My Kill. Therak and Nyra had spent another couple of months on the frozen planet, and Nyra's pregnant belly was now noticeably swollen. However, the lack of proper food was taking its toll. With their meat supplies depleted, they were both subsisting on nutrient paste. While superbly healthy, the paste made Nyra gag, and it was hard for her to keep down. She tried not to complain, but the way her ears drooped and the forlorn look she gave every bland meal made Therak feel as though he was failing her and their unborn cubs. One morning, as they went about their routine, an unexpected alert sounded throughout the facility. A mechanical voice announced, "Preparations for relocation initiated." Therak's ears perked up. "Moving day," he murmured. The hour countdown began. He and Nyra hurriedly secured all the loose objects they could before coming to command and strapping in. His heartbeat quickened from the rush. Nyra took a quick break in the lavatory before launch. While he waited for her, Therak noticed the cursor blinking silently on his command console. The AI had ignored him for years and had only started to wake up since he had appointed Nyra chief engineer. By showing the AI how it could benefit from her, she managed to get it to do all kinds of amazing things, such as giving her schematics on its systems and teaching her technical aspects of its maintenance that weren't apparent in the manual. On a whim, he leaned forward and typed, "Crew is hungry." To his astonishment, the AI responded audibly, the impassive rumble of its voice coming over the speakers. "Crew status?" The machine rarely communicated directly. "Healthy, but hungry," he said quickly. After a moment's thought, he added, "Our chief engineer is pregnant with your future crew. She needs additional nutrients." The console's display flickered as the AI processed his input. Graphs and data streams scrolled rapidly, indicating calculations of nutrient levels, crew requirements, and potential destinations. Then the screen went blank, indicating it had decided. "Come on, good planet, Therak muttered. He brought his hands to his lips and silently prayed for his ancestors to intercede on their behalf. He had been a good cat. All he wanted was fresh meat for his mate and babies. Was that too much to ask? Nyra entered the command center, sat next to him, and fastened the strap of her harness. "What's happening?" she asked, noticing his posture. "I told the AI we're hungry, and it seems to be responding," he explained, a hint of excitement in his voice. She raised an eyebrow. "It actually listened to you?" she asked. "Yeah. Is that so surprising?" he said, leaving out that he'd used lessons he'd learned from her to get it to respond. Nyra raised a brow as the facility's engines rumbled to life, a low vibration coursing through the floor beneath them. Therak anxiously unbuckled himself and leaned over her, double-checking Nyra's harness to make sure it was secure. "I know how to strap in, Therak," she said, rolling her eyes. Therak ignored her and finished testing her straps before he leaned back and buckled back into his seat. Nyra glanced over, curious. "Any idea where we're headed?" "Not yet," he admitted, gripping his armrests as the facility began to shake gently. The view outside the viewport shifted rapidly as they ascended through the planet's thin atmosphere. Swirls of icy clouds parted to reveal the star-studded expanse of space. The engines grew louder, building a resonant thrum that filled the entire facility. "Initiating jump sequence," the AI announced. Therak took a deep breath. The fabric of space around them seemed to ripple, stars stretching into elongated streaks of light. A momentary sensation of weightlessness washed over them as the facility entered hyperspace. Nyra's eyes widened, her claws lightly gripping her stomach. "I feel sick," she commented. He reached out and lightly squeezed her shoulder. "Hold tight. It won't be long." Within moments, the swirling void outside coalesced back into familiar pinpoints of starlight. The facility snapped back into normal space with a slight jolt. Ahead of them, a vibrant blue and green planet filled the viewport, its surface swathed in swirling clouds and vast oceans. Therak's eyes lit up. "Yes!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the command center. Nyra jumped at his outburst. "What is it?" she asked, her ears perked in surprise. He chuckled, a joyful sound that resonated deep in his chest. Grabbing her hand, he pointed excitedly at the planet. "Meat!" he exclaimed. She looked at him quizzically. "Meat? I've been here before," he explained, unable to contain his enthusiasm. "I don't know its name, but it's teeming with life-massive creatures that could fill our stores for years." Nyra's eyes widened as she took in the sight of the lush planet, her tail swishing with excitement. The facility began its descent, rumbling through the rich atmosphere. The horizon of the planet grew ever larger in the viewport. The bright yellow star of the system flashed blindingly. The ship fell through the cloud layer and slowed further till it touched lightly upon the surface. They unbuckled their harnesses. Therak was like a cub again, energy coursing through him as he tugged gently on Nyra's hand. "Come on," he urged. She laughed softly at his eagerness. "Slow down. What's the rush?" He grinned back at her. "You'll see." They hurried down the corridor, the familiar surroundings blurring as they moved. Reaching the airlock, Therak glanced at the environmental readout. 1 atm of pressure, breathable air, ideal temperature, he read aloud. "Perfect." Nyra's eyes shone with anticipation. "We won't even need clothes," she said. The door's mechanisms hissed as the locks disengaged. With a whoosh, the outer door slid open, revealing a breathtaking landscape. They stood on a gentle rise overlooking a serene lake, its surface shimmering under the warm light of the planet's golden sun. In the distance, a dense forest stretched toward rolling hills, the canopy a mosaic of greens. A gentle breeze carried the scents of fresh water and blooming flora. The air was warm and invigorating, which was a thrilling contrast to the icy world they'd left behind. Therak stepped forward, inhaling deeply. Nyra joined him, her hand still in his. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Bird-like creatures soared overhead, their calls echoing across the landscape. Along the shoreline, small animals darted between the rocks, while larger silhouettes moved gracefully at the forest's edge. Therak turned to her, his eyes gleaming. "Want to hunt?" She smirked and caressed her belly. "I don't think I can do much like this." Therak turned to Nyra with a reassuring smile. "Wait here," he said. Without waiting for a response, he sprinted back into the facility. Moments later he emerged carrying his massive sentinel sword strapped across his back and a disruptor in its holster. Approaching Nyra, he unfastened the holster belt and gently secured it around her waist, sinking it till it was snug. She looked down at the unfamiliar weight resting against her hip. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes wide. "It's a pulse disruptor," Therak explained. "Be careful with it. It won't damage the ship or my sword, but anything biological you hit will have its nervous system shut down, including me." Nyra gazed up at him, shock evident on her face. The realization that he was entrusting her with a weapon capable of easily killing him left her momentarily speechless. He didn't bother telling her that he felt confident that he could deflect any stray shot with his blade, so there wasn't really much danger. He met her eyes calmly. "You'll have 5 consecutive shots before it needs to vent the heat," he continued. She hesitated, her fingers lightly touching the weapon's grip. "I'm not sure I should have this," she murmured. "Why not?" Therak asked gently. She took a deep breath and she said, "Feline weren't allowed to carry weapons on the other ships I crewed," she began. We weren't allowed a lot of things. Even when I built my own ship and piloted it, I wasn't allowed to be the captain. I had to get a male to join my crew before the port authority would let me register. The way you're treating me is too different." Her voice trailed off as her fingers traced over the weapon. Therak's expression softened with understanding. "The way you were treated was unfair," he said firmly. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "It was?" she whispered. He nodded. "Here, let me show you how it works." Gently, he guided her hand over the disruptor, showing her how to disengage the safety mechanism. "The effective range is about 50 meters, he explained. "Aim and squeeze the trigger lightly." Spotting a large insect hopping between the nearby plants, he pointed. "Try aiming at that creature over there." Nyra raised the weapon, her hands steadying as she focused on the target. With Therak's reassuring presence beside her, she took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. A pulse of energy shot forth, striking the insect. It instantly burst into a small cloud of flaming particles. Both of them blinked in surprise. "Oh," Therak said, his ears twitching. "Well, that was more dramatic than I expected. But that won't happen to something bigger." Nyra lowered the disruptor, a mix of shock and exhilaration on her face. "I didn't think it would be that powerful," she said, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. He chuckled softly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "The weapon is just a tool. You're the powerful one. You always have been. Remember that." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "Therak." His hand on her shoulder gave a reassuring squeeze. She nodded, confidence settling over her. "All right then, let's get some meat." He grinned. "That's the spirit," as Therak took in the sight of his fun-sized mate holding the disruptor with a cutely determined expression. A pang of concern struck him. He suddenly realized he was about to lead a pregnant feline into a wilderness filled with potentially dangerous beasts. The thought sent a flicker of panic through him. He had just empowered her, and the last thing he wanted was to undermine that confidence by asking her to stay behind. Suppressing his protective instincts, he swallowed hard and tried to maintain a calm facade. As they began walking toward the forest, a distant rustling of trees caught his attention. The foliage shook unnaturally, signaling the presence of something large. Therak's ears perked up, and he instinctively held up a hand to halt their progress. "How about I go take a quick look around first?" he suggested, nodding toward her rounded belly. "You can't run around very easily like that." Nyra glanced down at herself and then back at him. "Fine with me. It feels like I need to go pee every 5 minutes anyway," she admitted with a wry smile. She raised the disruptor, adopting a ready stance. "Call me if you spot anything you can't handle. I'll take it out for you," she said with confidence. He couldn't help but chuckle at the adorable sight. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, offering her a lazy salute. With that, Therak slipped into the underbrush, moving swiftly and silently on all fours. His powerful limbs propelled him forward with effortless grace, each stride eating up the ground beneath him. The scents of the forest enveloped him, the rich aroma of earth, the crisp tang of leaves, and beneath it all the metallic hint of blood carried on the wind. He homed in on the scent, his senses sharpening as he navigated through the dense trees. Despite his size, his padded hands and footpaws allowed him to move almost noiselessly. The forest thickened, shadows stretching long under the canopy, but his keen eyes adjusted easily to the dim light. Emerging into a small clearing, Therak spotted the source of the scent. A massive feathered predator was hunched over a fresh kill, tearing into the carcass with razor-sharp beaks. The creature stood on 2 powerful legs, each ending in talons, as long as Therak's hands. Even bent over, the predator matched him in height, and when fully upright it would tower above him. A surge of excitement coursed through Therak's veins. His warrior instincts awakened, and he felt the familiar rise of bloodlust. The thrill of the hunt beckoned, but the thought of Nyra tempered his eagerness. She had been somewhat distant with him since her heats had ended, and he wanted to impress her. An idea sparked in his mind. If he could lure the beast out of the forest and defeat it where she could see, it might earn her admiration. But how to get it to follow him? His gaze shifted to the carcass the creature was feasting upon, a perfect lure. Steeling himself, Therak crouched low, muscles coiled like springs. In a burst of explosive speed, he lunged from his hiding place, letting out a fierce roar. The predator snapped its head up, eyes narrowing as Therak barreled into it. He struck a powerful blow to its leg with his claws, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone beneath his strike. The beast screeched in pain, stumbling backward. Seizing the moment, Therak grabbed hold of the carcass, an impressive kill in its own right, and hoisted it over his shoulder. With a triumphant grin, he dashed back toward the edge of the forest, exhilaration pumping through his veins. Behind him, the predator recovered, rising to its full, intimidating height. It let out a thunderous shriek, its feathers ruffling as it began to pursue him, albeit with a noticeable limp from its injured leg. The ground trembled under its weight as it gave chase, fueled by rage and the instinct to reclaim its meal. Therak weaved through the trees, the wind whipping past him. As he broke through the tree line into the open expanse near the facility, he skidded to a halt. He tossed the carcass aside, freeing his hands as he drew his massive sword from across his back. The blade gleamed in the sunlight, its familiar weight reassuring in his grip. He took a stance, muscles tensed, eyes fixed on the tree line. The predator burst forth moments later, its shrieks piercing the air. It charged toward him, each step causing the ground to quake. Out of the corner of his eye, Therak noticed Nyra seated on the ground some distance away. She was going to be so impressed. He puffed out his chest and held his sword high, preparing to behead the creature in a single stroke. The creature got closer, shrieking with rage. Therak's muscles tensed. But before he could strike, his whiskers twitched. He felt energy coursing through the air as 3 disruptor blasts flew whump, whump, whump into the predator's flank. It let out a final strangled cry before collapsing mid-stride. Momentum carried its lifeless body forward, and it slid to a stop, a mere step away from Therak, a cloud of dust billowing around it. He stood there, sword poised, blinking in disbelief. "She just stole my kill," he mumbled to himself, a mix of frustration and incredulity washing over him. Nyra, oblivious to his disappointment, let out a cheer. She pushed herself to her feet, beaming with pride. She took a few joyful hops, though she quickly steadied herself, placing a hand on her belly and the other on her lower back. As she made her way over to him, her eyes shining, Therak had an odd look on his face. That shot had been nearly 50 meters away. If Nyra had been the one holding the pistol when they first met, things would have turned out very differently. "Hey, where's my thank you?" she asked. "I totally just saved your tail," she teased, a playful grin spreading across her face. Therak blinked twice, processing her words. In truth, he hadn't once felt threatened by the creature. "I was never in danger," he said, puffing out his chest for emphasis. "Then why were you running from it?" she said, narrowing her eyes. "I was leading it here," he insisted. Nyra's chin tilted up, her eyes still narrowed at him suspiciously. She flicked the safety on and then holstered her disruptor while still eyeing him. "Well, I'm done here. Get into the kitchen and make something good," she said. "Mama's hungry." "Get into the kitchen?" he grumbled. The way she said the words, he felt like they were supposed to be an insult. But he had been planning on cooking for her anyway, so he wasn't sure how to take them. As he pondered, he felt a sudden sharp smack as Nyra slapped his ass. He startled slightly, causing Nyra to cackle with delight. She swaggered back toward the facility, her tail swaying rhythmically behind her. Therak watched her go, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. Despite the unexpected turn of events, he couldn't deny the delight he felt seeing her so spirited. Guess I'll have to impress her another way, he mused. He quartered both carcasses and eventually hauled all the meat into the facility's cold storage. The setting sun was casting a golden glow over the landscape by the time he was done. Next, Therak began the meticulous process of butchering the meat, his knife skills efficient, as metal separated skin and sinew from bone and flesh. He considered various recipes, wanting to create a meal that would both nourish and delight her. He diced the liver and heart of the giant predatory bird and fried it in the succulent rump fat of the woolly prey animal, searing it until it was caramelized a golden brown. The only spice he added was a dash of salt. As the aromas of cooking meat filled the facility, he couldn't help but anticipate the meal. This time he would be eating as well. He plated enough for two and pulled his communicator up to his mouth. "Dinner's ready," he said, eyeing the presentation of the meat to make sure it looked nice on the plate. Nyra was waiting for him when he entered the dining area of the mess, still wearing the same dark outfit she'd worn when they first met. He made a note to himself not to feed all the pelts into the nutrient paste reprocessor. Perhaps they could use them to make her some new clothes. She didn't really need clothes. He wasn't going to complain about her just walking around in her fur. But still, a touch of civilization here and there might make her feel nice. "Something smells amazing," she commented, her whiskers twitching appreciatively. He sat her plate in front of her. "Only the best for you," he replied. Nyra licked her chops and quickly popped one of the diced chunks of meat in her mouth. Therak, where have you been my whole life?" she said. Therak didn't bother responding, since she didn't really seem to want an answer. Instead, he merely watched with vicarious pleasure as she inhaled her food. "You know," she continued, speaking around her bite, "if I ever get out of here, I'm going to take you with me. You can be my live-in lover." "How does that sound?" she asked. Therak tensed at the suggestion. "I'd prefer life mate," he said. "Life mate?" she asked while raising her brow. "Therak, I'm Panthera, and you're a hated Pheron soldier from the time of the Great War," she said. "What would people in Panthera think?" she asked. "If I married a Pheron soldier, I would be shunned and our cubs' lives would be ruined. Besides, you're practically the same age as my grandfather," she said. She ate a few more bites while Therak sat in silence, trying to steady his emotions with calming breaths. "Still, you're pretty hunky for a grandpa," she added. "I'll just keep you around as my fun-time butler." Her jab broke through the dam of Therak's indifference. He felt a cold chill chase down his body and settle in his gut. Suddenly, he wasn't very hungry anymore. Abruptly, he stood from his stool, the legs scraping against the floor. Nyra looked up, a piece of meat halfway to her mouth. "Where are you going?" she asked, confusion creasing her brow. "I'm not hungry anymore," he replied tersely, turning away. She watched him begin to walk away, concern replacing her teasing smile. "Therak, wait," she called after him. "I was just joking." He paused but didn't turn around. "Please, eat with me," she said softly. There was a sincerity in her voice that hadn't been there before. After a moment's hesitation, he sighed and returned to his seat. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the tension thick between them. The rich flavor of the meat did little to improve Therak's mood. "So how old are you anyway?" Nyra ventured. 55. he answered without looking up. You? 23, she said. They nodded. Silence settled between them as it sank in that he was, in fact, old enough to be her grandpa. Nyra jammed food in her mouth, her eyes glancing around the room everywhere but at him. Therak sighed. 23 is pretty young to have built your own ship, he remarked, attempting to bridge the gap. How'd you get the money? Are your parents rich? She shook her head. Nah. My boyfriend and his buddies invested, she said. They provided the capital. We were going to strike it rich, raiding old Feran bases. You have a boyfriend? Therak asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Had, she corrected, emphasizing the past tense. Oh. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, his ears flattening slightly. Seeing his reaction, she added, Don't be too sad. I was only going out with him because I needed money and a mail to captain my ship. He ticked both boxes, she said. I see. Therak murmured, sitting back from the table. His appetite had completely vanished. Nyra noticed his barely touched food. Are you going to eat that? She asked, pointing at his plate. He shook his head. Her own plate was empty, and she eagerly pulled his plate before her, rubbing her hands together. Therak's cooking, yum, yum, she said with exaggerated enthusiasm. However, her praise did little to soothe him. As he stood to leave, she reached out and placed her hand over his. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. It seemed like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Therak looked down at her hand on his. Gently, he took it and knelt beside her. He rubbed his cheek against the back of her hand, then kissed her palm softly. Don't worry, Nyra. No matter what, I promise I'll always take care of you, he said sincerely. My loyalty is stronger than a few harsh words. Her eyes glistened as she gazed up at him. For a moment she seemed on the verge of speaking, but then she gasped softly, placing her other hand on her belly. What is it? He asked, concern flashing across his face. She guided his hand to her abdomen. Here, feel this, she whispered. Under his palm, Therak felt a gentle but distinct movement, a tiny kick. His eyes widened in amazement. They're moving, he said, a smile breaking through his earlier gloom. Seems they like their papa's cooking, she said warmly, her earlier teasing replaced by genuine affection. He looked into her eyes. He liked this genuine Nyra much better than the sarcastic tease he'd seen earlier. Nyra, you hurt me a bit back there, he admitted. I know, she said shakily, suddenly glancing away. I'm still getting used to the idea of us. She squeezed his hand gently. But I do appreciate you, Therak, more than I let on. He examined her face, seeing the sincerity there, then nodded. She offered a small smile. Stay. Finish the meal with me. He returned to his seat, the atmosphere noticeably lighter. All right, he said. They resumed eating, and this time the silence was comfortable.